If you will, turn into 2 Samuel chapter 5. That's where we're at. And Mark, you let me know when you are ready and we'll start. Facebook, if you're joining in with us tonight, we are doing our Bible study on Sunday night. We're in the book of 2 Samuel, and we left off last week in the book of chapter 4 of 2 Samuel, and we talked about how David was trying to join in the kingdoms, two kingdoms together, and how he had a couple of guys that come and did something wrong, and he'd put them to death. And so now we come in chapter 5, and we see that David's going to be made king over all of Israel. Up to this point, he'd just been made king of Judah. But now the other 11 tribes have come together, and the elders will come together, and David's going to have a way to be able to put everything together. So then came all the tribes of Israel to David unto Hebron, and spake, saying, Behold, we are thy bone and thy flesh. They finally have come together as one. How many times have I preached to you here at Iron Hill Baptist Church when we can come together as one, we see God do great things. Israel up to this point had been divided. There had been a civil war going on because there was two different kingdoms. Ishabeth, the son of Saul, who these two guys had killed and thought David would be pleased about it, but he was not. But by doing that, by him dying, it opened up the door for David now to be king over all of Israel. Also in time past, when Saul was king over us, thou was he that led us out and brought us in Israel. And the Lord said to thee, Thou shalt feed my people Israel, and thou shalt be a captain over Israel. They had remembered how good David was at the period of time while Saul was there. You remember all the people said that David had killed his tens of thousands while Saul had killed his thousands. Did not make Saul very happy. So all the elders of Israel came to the king of Hebron, and King David made a league with them in Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed David king over Israel. Now, made a league is he made a pact. In other words, he come to an agreement, says, if you'll let me be your king, and if you'll let these different tribes come together under one leadership, then I'll make it good for you. Now, David, it says in verse 4, was around 30 years of old when he began to reign, and he reigned for 40 years. Now, we know David was also king of Judah for about 7.5 years. And now he's about 30 years old, and he's going to become king of all of Israel. And then he's going to remain king for the next 40 years, which was to put him around 70. In Hebron, he reigned over Judah 7 years and 6 months. And in Jerusalem, he reigned 33 years over all of Israel and Judah. And the king and his men went to Jerusalem unto the Jebusites and the inhabitants of the land, which spake unto David, saying, Except thou take away the blind and the lame, thou shalt not come in hither, thinking, David cannot come in hither. Nevertheless, David took the stronghold of Zion, the same is the city of David. Now, the mention of the lame and the blind is probably an ancient play on words, and that's all we should take it as. The Jebusite defenders had such confidence in their fortress-like city that they boasted that even the lame and blind could defend such a town. And that's what it's talking about. We don't even have to have our best men to take care of this. We can just use our lame and our blind, and they can defend our city. And that's what they were talking about there. It's a play on words, much like some of these things that we have in our American custom today. And David said on that day, Whosoever getteth up to the gutter and smiteth the Jebusites, and the lame and the blind, that are hated of David's soul, he shall be chief and captain. Wherefore they said, The blind and the lame shall not come into the house. So David dwelt in the fort and called it the city of David. And David built round about from Millo and inward. And David went on and grew great, and the Lord God of hosts was with him. Now, it was meant all along for David to be king ever since Samuel went that time to Jesse and anointed him with oil. That was a great day that day, but it was not time for him to become king until this day. I want you to realize that as things happen in our world today, I try to tell people that gets all bent out of politics. I don't worry about politics as much because I see how God did in the Bible about choosing leaders. God's in charge, and whoever wins the election, and God means for that to happen. We can get upset about it. We can stomp our feet. We can stick our bottom lip out. And we can be all mad about it. But God's got a plan for everything. And while we're looking at the future of how things, while we're looking at the present of how things is, God's looking at the future. And we get what we deserve. But it says if we humble ourselves and seek his face and forgive and do the things that we should do, then he says he will hear our prayers and forgive our sins and heal our lands. And Hiram, the king of Tyre, sent messengers to David, and cedar trees and carpenters and masons. And they built David a house fit for a king. And David perceived that the Lord had established him king over Israel, and that he had exalted his kingdom for his people Israel's sake. Now, what we're getting ready to talk about now is going to be a little boring, but there's two things I want to show you that God put in here that's important. During this period of time while David was here, while he was in Jerusalem, he had 11 sons that were born to him. Many of these sons don't mean anything at all to us, but there's two that does. And I think that's the reason they're put in here. And David took him more concubines and wives out of Jerusalem after he was come from Hebron, and there were yet sons and daughters born to David. And these be the names of those that were born unto him in Jerusalem: Shamuhu, Shobab, Nathan, Solomon, Ibbar, Elishua, Nepheg, Japhia, Elishama, Elidiah, and Eliphalet. Now, all those names don't mean a whole lot to us, but there are two in there that's very important. And I think that's the reason God put them. Nathan and Solomon are important for genealogy reasons. Does anybody know why? Out of the line of Nathan. Now, we know King Solomon is, but it's genealogy, and it's dealing with the New Testament. Out of the line of Nathan, Mary came. Out of the line of Solomon, Joseph came. And I thought that, when you read between the lines and you understand them, so, well, wonder why God put all that in there. I could care less about this genealogy and this begat this and this begat this and this begat this. But it does that for later on, so that you can see that the line that that Jesus Christ had to come from was from the line of David. Even Mary came from the line of David. Even Joseph came from the line of David. And so that's important for us to understand that. And I don't know, if you just do regular Bible reading, you wouldn't catch on to that. But if you do great Bible study, you'll catch on to that. Now, David, once again, is going to fight the Philistines. They're always a constant threat to him. But when the Philistines heard that they had anointed David king over Israel, all the Philistines came up to seek David. And David heard of it, and he went down to the hold. Now, when it says that he went down to the hold, that went to the stronghold where they were at. And the Philistines also came and spread themselves in the valley of Rephaim. And David inquired of the Lord, saying, and David always was good about this, shall I go up to the Philistines? David never went out to battle without seeking to God, what should I do? No matter all the times that we've already talked about, every time that David was supposed to go into battle, he sought God. Shall I go up to the Philistines? Wilt thou deliver them into my hand? And the Lord said unto him, David, go up, for I will doubtless deliver the Philistines into thine hand. I wonder now, if we had to go into battle, would there be anybody praying in Washington, should we go? I just asked that question. Y'all can answer.
They're sneaking into it.
Huh?
There's nobody praying about it.
I would like to think there's somebody somewhere praying, but I can sort of I can see where you're coming from. And David came to Baal-perazim, and David smote them there, and said, the Lord hath broken forth upon mine enemies before me, as the breach of waters. Therefore he called the name of that place Baal-perazim. And there they left their images, and David and his men burned them. What were their images? They had false idols, false gods. And David was not going to have any false gods being worshipped over the true God. So his men, they burned those images. And the Philistines came up yet again and spread themselves in the valley of Rephaim. They are an enemy that won't go away. And so they will come once again. And when David inquired of the Lord, he said, "Thou shalt not go up, but fetch a compass behind them, and come upon them over against the mulberry trees." He says, don't go up the way that you want to go up this way. And let it be when thou hearest the sound of a going in the tops of the mulberry trees, that then thou shalt be stirred thyself, for then shall the Lord go out before thee to smite the host of the Philistines. And David did so as the Lord had commanded him, and smote the Philistines from Geba until thou come to Gazer. In this chapter 5, not a lot to take from it except this. David's made king over Israel. He doesn't have to share the throne anymore. All the tribes are in agreement that David should be their king. As soon as he becomes their king, he begins taking on more kings, more wives and concubines. It tells us here that he has 11 more sons born to him during that period of time while he was in Jerusalem, while he became a king. Why did I tell you that kings take on a lot of wives and concubines? It shows for power. The more wives, the more concubines you have, it means more powerful that you are. No woman would reject the king's proposal to come be in my harem. It was looked at as an honor to be asked to come. And we see that David had several. Solomon, we know, even had more than his daddy did. And we see also that it was important to remember that Nathan and Solomon confirms that Mary and Joseph both was from the line of David. And then as we see here, what is the king supposed to do for his people? He's supposed to protect his people. As soon as David is made king over Israel, then the Philistines come to try to start a battle, because here is David, and David's going to protect the people, going to protect the land. And they begin a battle, and David, we see here in 2 battles, he's defeated the Philistines both times, only because he asked God's help. And he said, God, what should I do and how should I do it? That should be a valuable lesson to us in everything that we do in our life, that we come and we talk with God before we do it. So many times I think we just take it upon ourselves to go ahead and act and go forth and do it without even seeking God's guidance, but we should ask God what we should do. Now, chapter 6 is a very important verse. And the point I want to make out as we talk about chapter 6, how many times have you really intended to do something right, but you went about it the wrong way, and you had to pay some serious consequences? You had goodness in your heart. What you were trying to do was not bad, and it could be like trying to solve a conflict between 2 people. I've been caught in that in my ministry and in my life before. You know, I intended good of trying to talk with people and trying to work things out, but maybe I didn't come to God, and maybe I didn't pray, and maybe I didn't give God a chance to work it out. And I've learned a valuable lesson to be patient and wait on God, and then when God tells me I should do something, then try to do it then. Here we see that David, since he's become king, naturally he wants God back with him. Now he's been seeking God, and God's been answering, but the Ark of the Covenant, which they always had with them in the Old Testament that David knew about, it was not with the people. And David wanted to bring it. That's something he wanted to do. He wanted to go get it. And it says, again, David gathered together all the chosen men of Israel. There were 30,000 of them. And it said, David arose and went with all the people that were with him from Baal of Judah to bring up from thence the ark of God, whose name is called by the name of the Lord of hosts that dwelleth between the cherubim. And they set the ark of God upon a new cart and brought it out of the house of Abinadab that was in Gilgal. And Uzzah and Ahio, the sons of Abinadab, drove the new cart. Now we're going to see one thing right here. The Ark of the Covenant was built with rings on the side of it, and they were supposed to slide in a shaft so they would not have to touch the actual Ark of the Covenant. And they were supposed to slide in these shaves into those rings that was there. And then the tribe of Levi is supposed to tote that, not touching the Ark of the Covenant, and that's how they're supposed to carry it. Now, the Philistines, when they stole it, they didn't abide by how they were supposed to do it, but nothing happened to them because they were ignorant to the fact of how it should have been done. So in this case, ignorance, God overlooked ignorance and didn't penalize them for what they were doing when they stole it and took it. But with David, David should have known. David can't plead ignorance. And that's with us, many things that we know and we can't plead ignorance. So they set up the ark and they went to get it, but they carried a cart. And that should bring a red flag right there. Well, why did they carry a cart? Did they get lazy all of a sudden? I thought to myself, why would they carry a cart? You're supposed to tote it. Well, in our mindset, a lot easier to put it on a cart, a lot easier to carry it that way. So they brought it out of the house of Abinadab, which was at Gibeah, accompanying the ark of God, and Ahio went before the ark. And David and all the house of Israel played before the Lord on all the manner of instruments made of fir, wood, even on harps and on psalteries and timbrels and on cornets and cymbals. Can you imagine that this scene they go in, they were so happy. Now, David's always going to have music because, you know, David, he went and played music for Saul when Saul was king. And so David, he's big into the instruments and playing and just having him a band and coming. And so they went to get the ark. David, this is one of the highlights of his career. I'm king of Israel now. I'm going to bring this God back to the people here. I'm going to bring them back and to the place it should be. And so here they went. They were all happy. They were just playing the instruments, and they was doing a good thing. And when they came to Nachon's threshing floor, Uzzah put forth his hand to the ark of God and took hold of it, for the oxen shook it. Now the ark was on the cart, and the oxen was pulling the cart, and they were walking along beside of it. But all of a sudden, they hit a rut in the road. And when they hit a rut in the road, the cart shook. And Uzzah, who was just walking alongside of it, what's your natural instinct if something starts to fall? You reach out and grab it. That's all Uzzah did. He just reached out to grab it to keep it from falling off of the cart because he didn't want the Ark of the Covenant to fall off. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Uzzah, and God smote him there for his error, and there he died by the ark of the God. Let's pause there for a second. How do you think everybody else felt? Here they were doing a good thing, right? It was a good thing. We all can agree. It was a good thing to go get the Ark of the Covenant, bring God, because that's where God dwelled. And even though David knew God was here, this is a meeting place where God came to meet him. You know, the cloud would always hover over the Ark of the Covenant, and the priest, the high priest, would go back there once a year to have this communion with God. That was the dwelling place of God. You could always count for God to show up at that place at that time. So naturally, David wanted to go get it. So now, David, in his haste, he was king. He made a little error in judgment about how we should go. Why he chose this way, I don't know, but there had to be a high price. And sometimes I just want you to know, when we're not doing things the right way, God does some drastic things sometimes to get our attention. You think God's got their attention? I think he does. I think when they saw him touch that ark and he dropped dead right when it happened, and went, now you might say, well, ain't this something? But God was angry with them because they had disobeyed his rule that he put forth in the very beginning. And that's all God is with us. He wants us to obey what he has set forth. And if we're not willing to obey that, then we have to pay the consequences. And David then said was displeased because the Lord had made a breach upon Uzzah. And he called the name of the place Perez Uzzah to this day. Now, I thought it was pretty unique that in verse 7, it said the Lord was angry. And in verse 8, it said David was displeased. You just will say he was angry too. David said, God, I can't understand. Here I am trying to do a good thing, and you go strike down a good man just because the cart was about to fall off. The ark was supposed to fall off the cart. But on that day, look, it got David's attention, and David was afraid of the Lord that day and said, how shall the ark of the Lord come to me? He took it personal, like the Lord did not want him to bring the ark of the covenant home with him. That was not the case. God wanted to come home, but God wanted him to do it that right way. So David would not remove the ark of the Lord unto him into the city of David. He says, boys, let's just quit. One's already died. We're going to regroup and think about this. So he says they left the cart aside into the house of Obed-Edom, the Gittite. Now, Obed-Edom, he's going to reap some benefits. And the ark of the Lord continued in the house of Obed-Edom, the Gittite, 3 months. And the Lord blessed Obed-Edom and all his household. I bet you old Obed-Edom, he would have been glad just go ahead and leave it here, boys. Y'all don't have to be in no hurry to come on back and get it. It's fine right where it's at. And because God was with them, God blessed them. But David's not going to give up. And we should not give up either. But David had to rethink everything he was doing. And he had to do it the right way. And it was told King David, saying, the Lord hath blessed the house of Obed-Edom, and all that pertaineth unto him, because of the ark of the Lord. Now, David might have thought, well, I'll just leave God down there. If that's the way he wants to be, we just, I don't know how David was thinking, but he didn't make a big hurry. He left it down there for 3 months. He didn't go right back the next day and try something different. He didn't go back the next week. He didn't go after 1 month. It's been 3 months now, and the ark is still there with Obed-Edom. So David went, it says, when he heard that it had been blessed at Obed-Edom, how he'd been blessed, that David went and brought up the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom into the city of David with gladness. And it was so that when they that bare the ark of the Lord had gone 6 paces, he sacrificed oxen and fatlings. This time David was doing it right. He researched out how he was supposed to do it. He made sure he was doing it that way. And it says in verse 14, and David danced before the Lord with all his might, and David was girded within a linen ephod. Now, let's pause there for that verse, because that verse is being talked about in many instances about, is it okay to dance? I want you to understand that what David was doing was dancing to show his glory for the Lord. The word danced, if you look at the translation of it, meant that he whirled about while he was going. Now, this is my opinion about dancing. Dancing for the Lord, as David did, I think is good. But a lot of dancing that takes place outside the realm of marriage is sexual in nature. And think where I'm going now. This is some of my theology. You won't find it in the Bible, but I did some study on this. Now, if that's your wife, and you choose to maybe at a wedding of somebody, and they're dancing, and you choose to maybe have a slow dance with your wife and everything, I can see that, because that's your wife. But what if you're dancing with somebody else that's not your wife? And when you're holding another woman or man in your arms and you're dancing, it can be sexual in nature. And it can lead to things that I don't think God intended for it to happen. So therefore, many people like to use this about David dancing. Well, it's okay to dance, David danced. But I think we have to really look at dancing in the form and dancing in the place of where you're doing it and how you're doing it and how the dancing is. Through the Baptist church, we're probably harder on dancing than any other religion there is. And many preachers won't even dare talk about it. They would just skip right on past it rather than me stopping and say, let's talk about this a little bit. But I'm just trying to get you to understand how some pastors go. And everybody's going to have an opinion about it. You know, where I'll have an opinion about it and how it's going to be and stuff. And can it be harmless? I guess it can. I know we think of our kids and don't want to be so hard on our kids, I guess. And they have these dances at school. We know they do. And they go to the school and they have these dances and look. But in reading and stuff and doing a lot of studying about it, they said that's what we have to be careful about, though. Where can dancing lead to? Dancing in itself is probably nothing wrong with, but in some instances it can lead to something else that God does not intend for it to happen. There's a difference, I guess, what I really want to say, in dancing to the Lord and just dancing for pleasure. And I guess you as parents will have to weigh that and pray about it. Coming up, I guess I'll just be open and honest about it. I did a lot of dancing and when I was coming up, and I didn't have nobody really to sit here and talk about it. I don't ever remember a Baptist preacher ever really spend a lot of time talking about dancing in church. And so you know, it was never talked about it. And is there a right and wrong about this? I guess everybody, it's one of those topics that everybody can have an opinion about it, but or am I right or are you right? And so I guess it's one of those things that we'll have to talk about conviction. Many of us have different convictions about different things. And for one, well, I'm not convicted it's wrong, preacher. So I'm just going to go ahead and do it. And I tell you, I tell people, well, if you're not convicted it's wrong and that's the way you feel, then, you know, that's you. And many people have different convictions. Let me talk to you about this conviction I had with a pastor. We were just talking. I'm not convicted that, I'm not crazy about doing, but I'm not convicted if I go eat out on Sunday that I've really done anything wrong. But I talked with one pastor who would not go out to eat on Sunday because it was his conviction that these people here could not go to church because they were having to work. And that if I patronize those places, then I'm partly to blame for them having to work and not being able to go to church. Now, you can look at me and say, well, boy, we're really getting deep tonight, but I'm just telling you that's his conviction. Now, did I go along with his conviction? I wasn't convicted of it because I'll stop by and I'll get me something to eat on Sunday. But it made me think how important his conviction was and what he did. Now, I'm not telling you, and I'm not beating you up for going to eat on Sunday. I'm not beating you up if you do some of these other things. We're just having a talk about dancing and convictions and all these things. And I'll let you work that out with God, okay? I'm not sitting here trying to say that it's right or wrong, but I'm just saying that we cannot just generalize because David danced and say all dancing is good. If you ever watched a movie, and I watched it and I don't watch it anymore, but if you ever watched a movie called Dirty Dancing, can we any say that Dirty Dancing is good? I mean, it's hard to say that. And so
It's the suggestiveness of it, of what society has done with it. I mean, we can all be honest and see what we see.
that's right.
You can look at what the intent of something is. I mean, when you say with the thing with Sunday, I mean, right now the biggest argument going on in the church is whether the Sabbath is really on Saturday or Sunday.
And people use that to mute a point.
So,
They say, well, if you want to argue about the Sabbath, it's not really the Sunday. And the Jews always celebrated on the Saturday, but we celebrate on the Sunday because that's the resurrection of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. You know,
but
so.
as far as what you're saying, the suggestion of what you're dancing for, I think that's really I mean, David was dancing by himself.
David's dancing by himself.
There's not much intimacy when you're dancing by
Exactly right.
yourself.
Well, it is with God. You're being
Where you're expressing your joy, you were happy, and you know, I see a lot of dancing. Jimmy Swaggart, Mama loves to watch Jimmy Swaggart. There's a lot of people dancing out there while they're singing the songs. The group singing up there, and they're moving in their seat and stuff there. You know, even our choir, we swayed a little bit there and stuff. But we're sort of dancing within ourselves rather than dancing with a partner. And I guess that's where the difference is, you know, there and stuff. So we've touched on that. We'll leave it like that. We've talked about it. We haven't come to any great conclusions, but I planted something for you to think about, okay? So David and all the house of Israel brought up the ark of the Lord with shouting and with the sound of the trumpet. And as the ark of the Lord came into the city of David, here's his wife that he went and got back from Saul, Michal. She's here. Saul's daughter looked through a window and saw the king, David, leaping and dancing before the Lord, and she despised him in her heart. Well, here's somebody else. I just talked about dancing. She didn't like dancing. She didn't like her husband dancing. And he was making what she thought was a fool of himself. I said, David, you a king. And here you are just up there leaping and jumping around like you've lost your mind. And so she let him have it. She was not happy. And they brought in the ark of the Lord and set it in its place in the midst of the tabernacle. David had pitched for it, and David offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. And as soon as David had made an end of offering burnt offerings and peace offerings, he blessed the people in the name of the Lord of hosts. And he dealt among all the people, even among the whole multitude of Israel, as well to the women as men, to everyone a cake of bread and a good piece of flesh and a flagon of wine. So all the people departed, every one to his house. David's heart, I want you to know, was in the right place. David had felt like he had achieved something that the people wanted and something that he wanted. David truly was a man after God's own heart. And not only did he just do for himself, but he also did for the people. You notice that he made sure everyone had a cake of bread and a good piece of flesh. He looked after it. But David still, as many of us sometimes, had to deal with that wife and was not happy. Then David returned to bless his household. And Michal, the daughter of Saul, came out to meet David and said, how glorious was the king of Israel today, who uncovered himself today in the eyes of the handmaids of his service, as one of the vain fellows shamelessly uncovereth himself. Now, many people like to look at that and said that thought David stripped off to be naked. He did not. When it talked about him uncovering himself, he took off his king's gear. He took off his robe, everything to do, and he looked like a common person among the people instead of a king. Well, many people read into that more than what it was when it said he uncovered himself. He did not when it said the handmaid. But he blended in with the people. And if you looked, you say, well, where's the king? Well, he's down there with them somewhere. He looks just like a common person. But David that day wanted to be that. He wanted to be that. And David said unto Michal, it was before the Lord which chose me before thy father and before all thy house to anoint me ruler over the people of the Lord, over Israel. Therefore will I play before the Lord. He's telling his wife, so see here, you don't know what the Lord's done for me, and I'm here to give him honor and glory any which way I see fit. And that's what he was doing. He was honoring and glorifying God. And I will yet be more vile than thus, and will be base in mine own side, and of the maidservants which thou hast spoken of them shall I be had an honor. Therefore Michal, the daughter of Saul, had no child until the day of her death. He refused to lay with her and give her a child because of her attitude that day. And we'll stop there, and we'll pick up in chapter 7. When we go back, David, he wants to build God a place. As he's got a place, he wants to build him a place, and we're going to see that God's not real happy about him doing that there and stuff. So like to always have a song of invitation. If we can we sing one? And we'll close out with that.